Hey, tiny truckers, I hope everybody's doing well out there. It's Adam from Bigfoot RC, and I thought it was time to get into the shop and do the next installment on the Redcat 6.4 dually build that we're doing. So last time we left off, we had mated and fitted the cab of the truck to the body. After the video ended, I did do two things. If you remember, we were sitting about that high. So I did go ahead and trim out the back of the cab a little bit. It's rough, but I wanted to clear the hub there so I could see how far down we could get this drop to go. And cool enough, we are sitting about as low as we can get the front right now. Not because we're touching anywhere, but because the lug nuts on the scale semi rims are actually holding up the fenders at this point in time. So mission accomplished on that one. I think we can maybe get her a little bit lower. I do want to, when we get into it, eventually try to camber the tires back in a little bit to clear it, which means we may be able to get a little bit more drop. But otherwise, outside of that, this is pretty much where we are sitting at this point in time. So the next step we got to do is to fit the bed to the cab. I do have the bed. It's not pretty like the cab was, and I just did some rough mock-up work on it. But right now, if we look at it, obviously the length of the chassis is going to be a problem. So I think I mentioned a few videos ago that eventually we're going to have to cut this chassis and extend it. We're not quite there yet. I think for this video today, what I do want to do is work on fitting the box itself to the chassis. So couple of things we're going to have to do. Like I said, this is going to be a dually. We've obviously got the dually wheels on it. I'll be putting spacers in here as well to stick the dualies out a little bit further when we get there. But in order to get the bed to sit down on here, we're going to have to do some major trimming. So if you're familiar with the Redcat chassis, right here in the back of the chassis is where the servos mount. And, you know, it's a full-size servo, so it's coming I don't know what, 20, 30 millimeters off of the bed itself. So that means we're going to have to cut out a section of the bed here to be able to recess it. I think we're also going to have to trim off some of the back of the chassis to fit in between the bed sides. We're going to have to trim up some of the bed mounts. Mind you, I don't really want to trim these, though, until I know where it's sitting, because we might be able to actually use those to be a bed support. The other thing we're going to have to do is mount the dually fender flares to it. I got those ripping off on my resin printer right now. Those are going to be kind of last anyways, because we're going to mount them. I did extend and slightly modify them, so rather than being a standard dually fender flare or a dually fender that comes to the body line, they're actually going to come way, way up. And the reason we had to do that is we got all of this tire we got to tuck up and underneath there. So, but before we get to cutting too much of that away, I think we're going to start, like I said, with the center of the bed. So I did some measurements beforehand. Basically, with the width of the tire itself, the entire wheel well has to come out. So we'll trim and cut the wheel well out, and then we're going to trim and cut the center section out of the truck itself to get it to sit. Hopefully after that, maybe a little bit of trimming back here, we can at least get the bed on and see where the bed's going to sit. And then, like I said, from there, we'll work on the stance of it probably in a future video. So I think that's where we're going to start. I am going to grab a few tools. We'll do a few measurements. Going to get my trusty old Dremel out again, and we'll have at it. I think that's about it. So hang tight 1 second. Let's get into this. So got our first cuts done. Notched out the bed where the servos are going to come through. Like I always say, I just did rough cuts. We'll go back in and clean them up later on. For those of you guys who are doing cuts like this, one of the things that I recommend is, and you probably can't see it, but my cut line is about 4 or 5 millimeters above where I actually cut. So that way when I come back in and I sand, I can now sand to that flush line that I wanted. But you know, so we're getting there. Hard to see, but essentially the servos and so forth will come up and through. I'm sure somebody's going to say, why'd you cut it so wide? The servos are going to be narrower. And honestly, we still got to cut out the entire wheel well here anyway, so I thought it would look ridiculous to have the wheel well cut out and then come into a narrower cut. We are going to build this like it's a project truck, so it's not going to have shiny paint. I've got a couple of ideas I want to put in the back here, going back to the mini truck days. And you know, I had a 80, what did I have, an 85 S10 that was all tubbed out and all of that, and I'll try to find some images of it. But you know, everything is going to be very rough cut, and this is where we are. So I think what we'll do is we need to continue on now with just the wheel wells, separating the wheel wells. And I think the best bet is going to be using my little handsaw for that, because I think the Dremel, you probably saw from the video, a bit of smoke shooting up. The Dremel tends to melt the plastic at high speed more than it cuts the plastic, and I don't really want to ruin the bedside. So we'll see what we can come up with, and let's just keep rocking and rolling. So there's one side cut and notched away. Eventually, again, because we're doing the dualies, when we get the fender mounted on here, we're going to be rounding all of this off to more conform with the tires. But one side done. Let's get the other side. And yeah, I did break my Dremel blade, so I'm going to go change that out real quick as well. Hang tight. All right, so we got both of the fenders off the inside there. Let's just move some of this crud out of the way. Man, oh man, this is a messy, messy build. Grab chassis. And I know it's not going to drop right on because we still have to deal with the overall width of the tires, right? The tires are still too wide, but we can get a rough idea of how this is going to look cut out. And I apologize, guys, that the view on the camera looks crappy, but nonetheless, it's still going to work for us. Now we're going to have to narrow up the chassis here a little bit so we can get this to drop down, and we'll see where we're at. But we're pretty darn close. So let's grab the Dremel and do a bit more cutting. So just notch the back of the frame a little bit narrower. Again, it's not going to fit all the way over because we've still got to do some more cutting and all of that fun stuff. But at least now we can get, I thought maybe I cut enough. Yeah, there we go. We can get the bed in there. And again, you get a rough idea of how it's going to sit, right? It's not totally positioned, but we're going to have a lot of open exposed area. We'll clean it all up as we kind of go along with the build. You can see though, say that's roughly, I'm thinking where it's going to sit in that area, kind of centered. We'll mark it all off. We're going to have to clear these out, especially when I put the extensions in. I'm not sure how wide I got to extend them yet. We got to wait till we get the bed sides attached to the fender flares attached, but we're going to be cutting out, you know, a good portion. I'm going to say, just based on where it's sitting right now, we're probably coming up to the top of the mold line here. So we're going to be basically cutting up and down, and we're going to be having to do that on both sides, right? This inside cut roughly is going to have to match this outside cut in order to get those tires to tuck. And this is going to be kind of the, you know, the tell-all. So I guess I can kind of force that tire over and you get a rough idea. But, you know, we still got, I don't know, what is that, about 1.25 inches to drop down. So we're not going to be able to get it to lay out flat, I don't think, because the fenders themselves are going to have some limitations on how far up inside we can tuck. Kind of filming this video in sequences. So here's one of the fenders off of my printer, and typically the fenders sit right about there, but you can see I've extended them and the fenders are going to come up a fair amount so we can get some tuck in there. And then it's kind of hard to see on the video, but all of this is going to get cut out to match the contour of the top part of the fender so we can get that total tuck. So at the end of the day, you know, and I apologize, guys, I don't have the greatest camera today, but this is going to be roughly the overall look, which may or may not turn out on the video. So not a lot more we can do. I didn't have a lot of time this weekend, unfortunately, with the holiday season and everything coming up, but I think this is as far as we're going to take it. Off camera, I'll spend some time cleaning up my cuts a little bit. The next video we get into, we're going to continue with the box. I'm going to have to do a bunch of prep work on these fenders in order to get them to fit properly. They're not contoured 100%. You can probably see some of the gapping in there because I just extended the fender. I didn't recontour it because at the end of the day, in all honesty, once I sand it and get it contoured in there, we're going to putty it all on anyways and kind of make those seams disappear. That'll probably be the next video, guys. Trying to think what else we had. I did have a few questions that popped up on some of the other videos, and one of the guys had asked how I mounted the tires. So tires are very simplistic. These are the RC four-wheel drive 14 scale semi tires. Back tires are just on a standard hex. Put them over the hex, put them over the hex adapter, and mounted them up. You can put those on any vehicle you wanted. Up front was a little more difficult, and this is totally just a temporary fix. There is no hex on the back side of these wheels. So I literally took a plastic hex, I rounded it, I put it in the mount point in the back of the rim and just slid it over the axle for the time being. So, I mean, you can see how wiggly and loose they are. I was told that RC four-wheel drive has a hex adapter now for these. So I'll probably do the hex adapter to an appropriate hex, and then they'll be permanently on there. That's pretty simplistic. You can't really see anything from the bottom side, but like I said, there's already a hex on the back. The front, I just took a plastic hex, I rounded it, put it into the mount, slid that over the axle itself, and just used a standard lock nut to lock those down. So that was pretty simplistic. I'm trying to think if there's any other questions. I don't think there was. As we go through this build and we get into finalizing the build itself and we get into doing body work, we'll go through some of my body work and some of my weathering stuff as well. So I intend this to be a bit of a longer series. But if you guys have any questions in the meantime, feel free to ask them. I really appreciate everybody, liking and following and hopping on board with this build. We're going to build something kind of cool here. When this is all said and done, I've already got the next build lined up. We might do another 6.4. I don't know. I've got a couple of projects, I guess, floating around here. So yeah, here's where we are. I'm going to throw the body back on real quick. I'm going to change the angle of the camera and clean up a little bit and give you guys one last view of this thing before we sign off. So everybody, just one last look at her, see where we're at. I want to take opportunity again to thank everybody for signing up and subscribing, commenting on my videos and liking my videos. I really appreciate it. Gonna have a lot more builds coming up on the channel. There was a video a couple of days ago that me and Chad also did talking about some of our winter builds. So if you haven't already, make sure you go over to True North RC and subscribe to Chad. You could see some more videos of the two of us and lots that Chad has done. I did do the Phantom Grill. I've done the True square body bumper and some really amazing bumperettes that Chad from True North designed and drew up. And if you're looking to get that ultra realistic look on your bumper, hit up Chad. I know they're not in the right place, mock-up guys, but I just want to take the opportunity to say Merry Christmas. I don't think I'm going to have another video out before the holidays here, guys. Everybody's getting busy, but we did have some time to get the Bigfoot RC garage all decorated and set up, and presents are under the tree. So I hope everybody has a great Christmas. Everybody has some time with some friends and family, and we will see you at the next video. Have a good night, everyone.